Yes, I did.
Yeah, please.
And I think first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the Cambodian Daily. It's a true honor to speak with you today, this afternoon. You're absolutely right on many things. President Trump's all about law and order, and we want to make sure the rule of law is being applied. And President Trump saw the moment that this pandemic has arrived, he looked to the API White House Initiative program, in which he established under his administration. So for 45, it took 45 presidents to actually establish an Asian American White House Initiative program that takes care of not only Asian American business owners, but also the safety of Asian Americans. So President Trump has put this White House Initiative program, which all of them are my good friends. And on April 13th, he assigned an executive, by executive order, that any hate crime, all hate crimes against Asian Americans, that will happen during this pandemic, you will be prosecuted to the maximum extent of the law. You will be put in handcuffs. You will be prosecuted. You will not wait. So what that means is, if you're waiting to have your day in court and you have 5 or 10 people in front of you, you're going to get put in front of the line. And so we are aware that the hate crime is happening. And since April, we have taken action, this administration, and we're making sure that everybody will be prosecuted.
Okay, I read this quote from Mr. Russell Chung, Chair and Professor of Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University. He says, quote, "Without government accountability, we risk COVID-related racism against Asian Americans becoming deeply entrenched, ultimately impacting the lives of millions of people in California and around the country." So what really can our leader do to prevent that from, like, getting more and more violence?
I agree. And so the White House Initiative made a statement that there is a significant issue within the Asian American community. We are not going forward with reporting these crimes. We're not going to the police department. We're not going to FBI. We're not talking to the DOJ. We have to change the way we view about reporting these crimes. So internally, culturally, we have to encourage that this administration, this President Trump, is on your side. He's all about law and order. And if we do not start encouraging our elders, our brothers and our sisters, and talking to our children, that when something bad happens to you, whether if it's a small minor joke, whether it's someone that shoves you or pushes you or assaults your elder or vandalizes or robs you, you need to come to tell the authorities so we can act.
So what you're saying, if there is a crime, a hate crime somewhere, then the victim has to report immediately without waiting?
Correct. And you can do a confidentiality as well, too. We understand that there is a language barrier. Unfortunately, right now, we do not have a translator for the Cambodian Americans. This initiative program was just recently launched. We are looking forward to expanding and having a representative at the White House with the White House Initiative program that represents the Cambodians, where they can have someone that can speak Khmer and go directly to them. That's something that President Trump has felt that has been neglected in all previous administrations. We really need to create a welcoming environment that not just appeals to just Chinese Americans, but also Southeast Asian Americans like in Cambodia. So we are working on that right as we speak. And I want to also say is that, again, we have to come forward and have these great discussions. And after concluding this interview, I will give you all the contacts and the resources that the Cambodian Daily can have at hand. That way, if there is such an event, come to the Cambodian Daily, let them know what happened. You don't have to get in front of the camera and testify. We just care about letting us know what crimes are being committed, so that way we can go in there and defend you, and that we can protect you. But if you don't if you don't tell us, then our hands are tied and we can't help you.
Right. We welcome such initiative and thank you. Ms. Sulak, in California alone, we have more than 800 hate crimes reported against Asian Americans in the past 3 months, and over 2,120 hate incidents across the country, and about 40% of them occurred in California. Now, our Cambodian community across the country, and also wherever Asian Americans concentrate, do these people, members of the communities, know where to report? Do they know if there is such a hate crime in the community?
Thank you so much for asking that question. I don't think our community actually know where and who to report because there's so many different departments. Like Michael mentioned, he mentioned DOJ, he mentioned the FBI. So there's different departments, and those departments plays different role. It's also, it's vital that they have all that information, and Michael's going to provide those information at the end of the show, so that way Cambodian Daily can help our community. One of the most important problem is that even though our people doesn't have that vital resource, but they're also afraid to come out to speak, to report, and to let the official know that, hey, they have been victim of a hate crime, because we have a large Cambodian community in the Long Beach area where there's like a few jewelry store that was demolished, destroyed by the looters, and we have some the market. So there's like a large handfuls in the Long Beach area. But most important is that they only report to like the local officials, and they also report to their insurance so that they can get the insurance money to cover the business. But right. They need to report to the federal, the DOJ's, the FBI, so that these hate crime can end in our community, and that those who committed the hate crime should be prosecuted.
Yes. Well, the FBI is taking hate crime very seriously, at least according to the published reports on their website. Mr. Ruan Visna, as the president of Cambodian American Association for the Republican, and I know you are Republican, you support the Republican candidate. When the president, our president, President Trump, has previously been criticized for calling the coronavirus the Kung flu and the Chinese virus. So my question to you is, do you think certain groups of people simply take advantage of the spread of COVID-19 across the United States to divide America?
So I currently work in the health field within my city. And this is an interesting question, interesting.
And your city is where?
Danbury, Connecticut.
Danbury, Connecticut. The state of Connecticut. Okay.
Right. So it's from my perspective, from where I sit, I'm seeing the virus being used by different groups for many different reasons. And ironically, coincidentally, it just happened to be so opportunistic that it's being used, or the event is occurring during a presidential election. So do I believe that the COVID-19 is being used as an excuse to commit hate crimes, commit violence? There's no data that I've seen that suggests those facts. Do I believe that there's rhetoric that's pushing or motivating these hate crimes during this pandemic? Again, I haven't seen any data that suggests those facts. Matter of fact, if we look at the FBI hate crime data from the UCR, and you look at other data from the BGS, which is the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which is another nonprofit organization that collects hate crimes, collects data on crimes, you'll see that one set of data suggests that hate crime has gone down in the last 10 years. In the meantime, well, other set of data shows that hate crimes has gone up a little bit, and there's an uptick of hate crime in the last 3 years. So if you want to use numbers and dissect hate crimes, it's difficult because it's the same thing as trying to predict the weather.
I'm using the statistics or the report reported in Axios media, and it also pulled out from the statistics from the FBI and also from law enforcement agencies in the state of California and in other major cities. That's why it has the figure of 2,120 hate incidents across the country, but 40% of them occurred in California. And there are hate crimes reported in California alone, over 800 incidents in the past 3 months. So I don't know if that statistic is a surge or it's a decline. But you can elaborate on that.
The problem with data collection is that, first off, it's 1% of the police force that reports these kind of crimes to the Department of Justice has decreased by 1% since last year. On top of that, the data collection has been inconsistent at most. A lot of times when these data is collected, some of these hate crimes are at times interpreted on the front lines by the police officer. So at that very moment, the police officer will have to investigate and decide if this is a hate crime or not. And a lot of times, some of these cities don't report such crimes. So as far as data collection goes, you do have some inconsistency in reporting. And that's why we have to be very careful when we look at numbers in totality based off that fact. Now, as far as California reporting a lot of hate crimes, we also want to keep in mind that proximity does come into play. To what extent, I'm unsure myself, but proximity does come into play. And we know that California has a much larger population of Asians, specifically Los Angeles has a tremendous amount of Cambodian people living in that city. So, I still have yet to see data that suggests that hate crime is motivated by the coronavirus. But I will want to point out, since we're on the subject, that what's happening in Portland, Oregon right now is ridiculously atrocious. The country is going through a pandemic, and it's no longer a peaceful protest in Portland. Now it's just an all-out riot. In my eyes, in my opinion, it's domestic terrorism being committed against federal officers. So, is it being used in this particular instance? Probably. But the fact is that crime does exist. Crime may have gone up just a little bit, but crime has also gone up. If you look at some of the other statistics, since 2007, crime in general has gone up. You look at New York in the past 2 years, their murder rate has hit the roof. And we're supposed to be inside during this pandemic. But unfortunately, some folks still have time to go out there and hurt one another, hurt their fellow man. So it's my conclusion is not really, there's some inconsistency with the reporting, and we can't really fully evaluate the effects of the pandemic and crime, or the relationship between the pandemic and the crime itself.
Some community leaders in the Asian American community simply believe that our president, at one point or another, is fueling these anti-Chinese sentiments among Americans, not caring that the people who will, and I'm quoting this from one of them who spoke to the Washington Post, and the president is also fueling these anti-Chinese sentiments among Americans, not caring that the people who will truly suffer the most are Chinese Americans and other Asian Americans, his citizens whom he is supposed to protect. So sometimes that will lead me to another question. Many ordinary Americans look to their leader at the top for guidance in times of crises. What can you suggest our president to do to help to provide some form of relief and restore trust and confidence in Americans? Michael.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, was that President Trump has established the White House Initiative program to make sure that we are having direct dialogue with the community, and we have already taken action. So if you committed any crime that's hate-related during this pandemic, you will be prosecuted to the maximum extent of the law. Second is that it has brought to my attention, in with Sue's assistance here, we had a Cambodian American jewelry business owner who lived in Philadelphia. She was 8 months pregnant, and at 1 o'clock in the morning she was woken up when the Black Lives Matter and radical leftists broke into her store. She's been an American citizen for over a decade, and she makes an honest living. And 8 months pregnant at 1 o'clock in the morning, she went and begged and pleaded and cried and asked the protesters to please stop looting, take whatever you have and leave, because when I have this child, I don't know how I'm going to feed him if I cannot provide for him. And the looters, what they did was they just pushed her to the ground and kicked her in the back. And she had to get up, carrying her child in her womb, and run for her life. She called the police, but the police, who is an elected Democrat, never once showed up. Took 2 days later. That's 2 days too late. Not only that, but since the crime has taken place months ago now, there hasn't been a single follow-up from the mayor. There hasn't been a single follow-up from the elected Democrat congressman. There has been nothing. And so she reached out to me, and immediately I took her information in. We filed a report with the White House Initiative program with the Department of Justice. The FBI came out, interviewed her, and now we're going to prosecute all those people who harmed her. And thank God that child was not killed, because she had a tough labor, 24 hours, and barely made it out alive with her child. And so the community may not experience as wide as some people may say of hate crimes, but we are aware that there are hate crimes happening. But I think a part of it is in Long Beach, where we do have a heavy Cambodian American population, and in St. Paul, and then also in Philadelphia, they're afraid because their elected officials hasn't stand up and said this is right and this is wrong. And so President Trump, again, is about law and order. He loves the police officers because he doesn't want to see this. The Cambodian Americans immigrated to the United States barely speaking the language, to having no skills at all, and they build an honest living, and to have it be torn down, robbed, pushed to the curb, and their life on the line just because of a conflict of a problem that had nothing to do with them, it's not okay, it's not all right. And that's why we understand. But President Trump cares about the Asian business owners, and that's why he established the White House Initiative program. So you're going to have people who are going to defend their party before their culture, before their heritage. And so whenever you turn to the president's administration, we're out here to defend the American Cambodians. And so to the people and naysayers, I would just turn back. If you're experiencing a hate crime, you have to hold your local elected level officials first accountable. And if they're Democrat, then vote them out.
Now, you are mentioning the new initiative launched by the president, and I hope to get all information from you after the show. So with this initiative comes his warning to send in more federal agents to some major cities, as you and I have heard in the news. So do you think these efforts to crack down on violence, on hate crimes and some other violence, some other forms of violence, do you think this would be effective?
Oh, it's going to be the greatest thing, because you know why? In America, you shouldn't live in fear. We have our friend that we mentioned. She's so afraid of what happened. She's afraid that we would even come forward with her information, her name, or even her store location. And so by having additional 200 federal agents, we're going to bring in various talents, people who can speak Cambodian, right, Cambodian, people who can speak Lao, who can speak Mien, who can speak Thai. You know, we want to have a diverse force that goes in there and we really collect the information, and that way people feel safe to report and to have that dialogue so we can make sure that the bleeding stops. And unfortunately, when people get elected, they don't want to look bad. And so they keep things under the rug as if it never happened, unless it's going to help them win an election. And so President Trump, we don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. If these hate crimes are happening, we're going to stop it. We're going to send in our people in, because we can no longer trust the local level because they care about political gains and loss, wins and loses. We care about the safety. Okay, go ahead.
So you are saying that these local elected leaders from the state down to counties to cities don't do their jobs?
Absolutely, because you see it.
They are supposed. They were elected to take care of their people.
Exactly, but unfortunately, there's always the issue of greed and power and retention of power. And when you have elected sheriffs who are Democrat in these very blue districts, they don't want to look like they're losing control. They don't want to look like these crimes are overtaking. These criminals are overtaking the country, overtaking their city and their town. And so we're going to intervene and we're going to take over and work with them as much as we can. But if any wrongdoing that has happened, we're going to make sure that they're going to be held accountable, and including the local officials as well too.
I'd like to follow up on that subject you just touched on. Now,
absolutely.
If the president believes that doing that is justified, is legitimate, why do we have to send in agents, armed agents, without patches, without names, without, nobody knows exactly where the agents are coming from, which department, the FBI or the prison guards or whoever. Simply the Homeland Department, Homeland Security Department is responsible for that. But we don't know who these people are coming from. So why can't we just send people with, patch and, say, for example, the Marine Corps or the Airborne Division, why can't we just show this to the American people?
Well, that's it really depends on the internal and external threat. I believe that there's a real well-organized crime that's taking place, and sometimes to order to stop the crime, you must not let your enemy know what you're doing. And there are criminals, and criminals are our enemies, and we cannot let them know what step we're going to do. Like if we know somebody, the group of 40, 50 people that broke into that jewelry shop, the jewelry store of the Cambodian business owner, and kicked her down and pushed her and made her run for her life while she's 8 months pregnant. If they knew that President Trump's going to send in the FBI or Homeland Security to go knock on their door tomorrow at 12 o'clock, then I don't think they'll be there. So I have fully trust and confidence in our rule of law in the United States, and that these people care about the best interests for our small business owners, for our way of life, and we're going to end these acts of criminal violence. And if it means that they won't disclose who they are or what department they represent, as long as they get to the source and root it out, so that way these Asian Americans doesn't have to live in a time of fear, then so be it.
Okay. Sulap, we've seen violence taking place in some major U.S. cities. It now turns into a clash between unarmed protesters and armed, unmarked federal agents in the streets of America, where local authorities are supposed to handle public security until there is a need for federal intervention. Don't you think the president's orders would create more fears among vulnerable citizens?
Actually, I don't think President action will create more fear. First of all, you have to understand how the American structure works. We understand that America is based on the constitutions. No one is above the law, and based on the constitutions,
these protesters are not armed, and they were protesting peacefully.
Right. That's why I was trying to. No, not all of them are protesting
don't they have
peacefully.
I mean, don't they have the First Amendment protection?
Right, but then there's also the 10th Amendment where they divide who has the rights under certain states and under certain areas. So everyone looks to President Donald Trump and pushes the blame on him when technically the local government officials under the 10th Amendment was supposed to order the National Guard in to get everything settled, but the governors and the mayors are not doing that, and so it's like they're pushing the hands to President Donald Trump to take actions, trying to use the insurrections the insurrection law. I forgot the federal law. I'm sorry, I forgot the law number already. But technically, so when you have local officials such as the governors and the mayors who are responsible for that area, and they're not doing anything, but they sit back and watch as looters destroy different business owners, different places. For example, I'll take the heart of the riot, Minnesota. Where everyone sees it offhand on, national televisions all over the place that, they're not peaceful. They burned, they destroyed, they loot, and they, and there's a stacking numbers of people who died during those riots. So at the same time, we have a large Cambodian communities who reside around that area. So when you said that they're peaceful protests, they're not, because that is the wrong definitions of describing, or the wrong words that describe those actions in around those areas. If they're peaceful, Cambodian business owners, such as the one who owns subways, grocery stores, flower shops, they came to America as a group, refugees, empty-handed, with nothing. Okay, zip, zero, nada. Just like myself as a refugees who came here, we start from scratch, and for 20, 30 years, they own those businesses. Then all of a sudden, everything is destroyed, and within overnight. Do you call that as a peaceful protest? And then in the end, you push it all on President Donald Trump, as the man who incite race, the hate crime, when the governor itself and the local mayors should take action, because it is their responsibility. The people voted for them. The people was the local people voted for them so that they can be the person in charge of those areas. But if they're not going to do anything about it, don't blame President Donald Trump for taking action.
Okay. Visna, you and I, your families, my family, your generation, my generation, we fled the police state, communist dictatorship, authoritarianism. So we find America a peaceful place, a land that we love to live and raise our children. Now we are seeing a lot of things that are happening out there. So what do you call the rule of law? What do we call America now? Is America the rule of law or something else at the moment?
I still call America the greatest country on earth. We're going to have our issues. We're going to have our growing pains. And this just may be a cycle. This just may be a cycle, because lest we forget what happened after the Rodney King trial, how Los Angeles burnt. And then even before that, we had the Watts riots. And before that, we had all the civil rights movement. So a lot of these things just happens in a cycle. So if you ask me what America is still the rule of law. America is still absolutely the best country on earth. And what I believe who we have now sitting in the White Office is probably one of the best presidents of my time. And that's based off what Michael here is telling you, of what he's doing with the Asian community and how he's protecting the Asian community. And it goes back to what Sue Lack mentioned with all these protesters. Now, we got to look at these protests, and there are quite a few peaceful protests. And pepper spray at police officers, attacking police officers with umbrellas. Some of these are well-coordinated attacks, as we saw in Chicago. And I think that's what prompted the president, who had to take that extra step to call a local mayor. A United States president had to make a phone call to a local mayor and plead with her to have federal troops come in and assist her local police department. This mayor was responsible for the protection of her city, and she sat and she waited. Even her own Democrat aldermen and councilmen pleaded with her to put an end to the violence in Chicago, and she did not since the George Floyd protest. Now the president of the United States had to make that phone call, and now federal troops are going into Chicago. And we're going to see a difference. We're going to see a change. What I believe we're going to see is a lower crime rate.
Right. I've heard many governors or mayors say for the past few days or weeks that they don't welcome federal agents in their states, in their cities. So the president is is determined to send the troops in, even without those mayors and governors welcoming the federal agents? Don't you think it's going to be a war between the federal agents?
Not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because everybody who holds a badge or everyone who's ever donned the uniform takes only one oath. And that one oath is the exact same oath. It's the oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. So when it comes down to it,
some powers are vested in the hands of local authorities.
Sure. And as Michael mentioned earlier, politics is coming into play. If these hands were vested with the local authorities, would we have this kind of violence in Chicago?
Well,
it's election season.
I'm not going to argue, but don't you think that they know what to do when the time comes for them to request federal intervention? Don't you think that the local authorities know when or to ask for help?
You know what? We can only hope. And again, all of this is hindsight. Hindsight is 20/20. All of this is. We're just pundits here, giving our opinions. But do I think that local authorities will know? The question you posed earlier is, does COVID-19, as it relates to hate crimes, does it motivate or inspire hate crime? I think the better question to ask for this entire show is, does politics contribute to communal behavior? Does politics contribute to the protests that we see that's going on across the country? I firmly believe politics has a lot to do with the unruly behavior and the violence that's happening in some parts of this country, which coincidentally and ironically happens to be Democrat-controlled states and cities.
Okay, I don't want to get involved in politics. People have different opinions, different thoughts, different ways of thinking. But I'm just looking at the facts and the figures here that I just put out to you. Over 2,800 plus in California for the past 3 months. So I don't know if that number tells us anything. I'm not sure. Okay, Michael, Asian Americans as a minority group are concerned. Even the FBI director, Christopher Wray, expressed concern in April this year that the hate crimes remain at heightened level. Law enforcement experts also expressed concern that racist remarks from some politicians add fuel to the fire and motivate angry people not only to commit hate crimes but also homicide against minorities. Do you agree with this assessment?
What I will say is this. We are facing a pandemic. The pandemic started in China. How it arrived to America, whether if it was from Italy or not, this is something that the world is not used to. It's not used to that you have to get up every day and put on a mask to protect yourself and your friends and your family members, or to keep 6 feet away from each other. It is known that African Americans has been mostly impacted from this pandemic as well, as far as people being deceased and being infected. And I think that the country and the world is upset. And so how we come together to overcome these hurdles of pain and grievance, we have to come together with the rule of law, and that everyone must be respected and treated with fairness and dignity. And I think going back to some of the questions that you're having in your talking points was, my question to you is to the people is when will be enough? So we sit back and we give the trust for the local mayor and the local elected officials to handle control of their city. But if you look at St. Paul, Minnesota, where we have a lot of Hmong, Lao, and Cambodian folks down there, University Street was burnt to the ground. Over 300 businesses was looted and burnt to the ground. And millions of dollars were lost, and that money's not coming back. And so people are upset, and they're gonna respond. They're gonna respond because of COVID-19. They're gonna respond because of the riots. And unfortunately, all Asian Americans will be targeted, and that's why we're doing everything we can to make sure that by executive order, that if anybody harasses, bothers, destroys property, that they will be prosecuted, and that going, a little more deeper into it, we have to come together, and we have to change the culture. Asian Americans have to come forward and continue to file police reports and continue to let us know. And I think that the more we double down, triple down the rule of law, the better our community come. And the question comes back to the community is, how much crime will it take on innocent people until the federal government has to intervene and maintain control? Okay? I mean, to me personally, seeing an innocent, beautiful, 8-month pregnant woman who's just trying to make an honest living, who went down to the protesters and said, in tears, whatever you have stolen, take it. Just leave me with whatever is done. I won't call the police. Just please. And she begged and pleaded. And what did they do? They pushed her down to the ground. And they almost killed her and her child. And she had to run for her safety. So my question to your viewers is, when is enough is enough? And if we're losing confidence and trust in our local government, then President Trump will stand in, because he does not like bullies. That's one thing that this President Trump does not do. And anyone who he hangs around with, we're not afraid. We're not afraid of anybody, and we're going to hold these people accountable. And while people like to say that his tough language can be interpreted as racist or inciting violence, the only thing that I'm seeing is this administration is continuing to establish a White House Initiative program for Asian Americans, welcoming environment, trying to get all the languages translated where we can know what is going on so we can intervene and take action. And if we're not going to take action, we're going to do the first step by making sure the local authorities are taking action. And if they're not going to take action, then we will. Because we want to make sure that Asian Americans here are safe. And it's not their fault that COVID-19 happened. Okay? And so I just want, the viewers to really sit and think, when is enough is enough? And in my point, it's gone too far. Okay, it's gone too far. These innocent people shouldn't be pushed to the ground.
I agree with you on that part. Michael, just one quick follow-up. Some people believe that politicians from either side are taking advantage or exploiting the pandemic for their own, gains. Okay, don't you think that if politicians in Washington, D.C. started to listen to experts' advice, to science, things would have been better? Or a lot of things, could have been prevented?
as far as first of all, President Trump, if that question's a little bit unclear, if you're referring back to COVID-19, President Trump was the first one and the only one to say we're shutting down immigration.
Some of the hate crime reports, the hate crime surge is a direct result from this pandemic. So don't you think that if we started to handle it, based on the advice of the experts? Okay, I'm not saying who, but whoever is in charge of protecting us. If they started to listen and take the appropriate advice to protect us, don't you think that a lot of negative things could have been prevented?
Well, I think President Trump is the greatest listener of all. That's exactly why he came into office, is to drain the swamp. Because far too often, Washington establishment politicians, if you donate a lot of money, if you rub the shoulders, if you're born in a wealthy environment, or the political ruling class, like the Clintons and the Bill Gates and those folks, well, then guess what? You have a voice, and you're an expert, and it's only your voice and your concern. But what's beautiful about President Trump's administration is that he's tired of listening to the same old rich and ruling class that wants to maintain power and control. That's why he established the White House Initiative program, so we can find people like Sue. We can find stories like our friend in Philadelphia who was pushed down to the ground, who was 8 months pregnant, and we can get connected with Cambodian Daily. And so that way we can have a better dialogue, because the experts are not telling us about your channel. They're not telling us about your community. We have to have troops on the ground that's engaging the Cambodian American community, finding out exactly what has happened, finding out, where is these crimes taking place, so we can go ahead behind closed doors and making sure that our elected officials, both in the White House and both at the local level, are doing their job. And so we need to have better dialogue. So I don't like the idea of just always going to the same group of political elite experts. I like the idea of having a voice that represents all America. I mean, thank God for Sue and the Cambodian American Council. I never even knew the Cambodian Daily even existed. And now when I got to look up at all the things that this show is doing,
over a year old,
wonderful.
A year and a half.
Yeah, and you have over
in Washington, D.C.
300,000 following. And in 1 year and a half, that's amazing. Who does that? So now I'm not only taking on this issue, but I also want to try to get Cambodian Daily to see if we get press credentials. Obviously, the RNC convention was canceled. That's too bad. I was going to try to see how we can get you in the RNC convention. But we need to reach out to not just the same political elite experts, but we want to reach out to the people that doesn't necessarily have a voice, because they'll look at your demographic and say, oh, there's only less than 200,000 Cambodian Americans. That's not enough to even tip an election scale.
Sure.
So we're not going to focus on them. We'll focus more on Chinese Americans, and we'll focus more on the Vietnamese community, because the Vietnamese is well over 1 million. Right. And that can help us in the election. So President Trump, I can see the frustration from the experts, and yeah, there are some good things that can come from experts, but his culture, his tempo is about reaching, all Americans and pockets that necessarily doesn't have that one-on-one dialogue.
Thank you. So,
no problem.
So if you got an opportunity to talk with the president, what is your message to our elected leader not just the president, but for both political parties, to ensure peace and harmony in America?
To ensure peace and harmony?
Yes.
To be honest, with all these different political spectrums and all these different opinions, I would only, tell President Donald Trump to be honest with the people, to be upfront with the people, because that's the only way you'll help to unite the community. I mean, I can't say that President Donald Trump will be able to ensure peace, because not everyone wants peace with President Donald Trump. I've seen that on a daily basis on the video. So, like almost every single night, you have mass media cut it and edit, taking words out of context to change his narrative. So even if he promotes peace and freedom, mass media such as CNN and all those other mainstream media will take his word, cut it, and change his message and make it into something that he says, incite. So, I mean, if I
Don't
was
you
to
think
be,
those are his words?
not really. If you literally sit and watch his video and listen to his word verbatim, you will know that his message isn't what mainstream media is saying. If you look at CNN, right, you have the host that kept saying, oh, Trump this and that, and they analyze it. Now, when they analyze those informations, they're taking words out of context. They change his message. They change his whole message around. So that's why I would always advise people to go and listen to the whole entire clip instead of listening from a mainstream media that takes a little clip, a short message from him, and then change it into like something that's completely not his message. It's the same as Candace Owens has always tried to advocate. So if I was to have the opportunity to sit one-on-one with President Donald Trump, I would thank him for giving the Cambodian community the opportunity to voice our concern, to show our support, and to thank him for draining the swamp in America, because that's what we need right now.
Visna, what is your message for our elected leader when you get a chance in order to ensure peace and harmony in America for your children and grandchildren? Visna?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, can you hear me?
You get my, now I'm hearing you now.
I'm lucky enough to work for the best Republican mayor in the whole state of Connecticut. And his style has always been people over politics. If you ever go on his Facebook and you see the kind of things he doesn't look at people as really as voters. He doesn't really look at them as someone he has to cater to politically. He just looks at them as people, because people should always trump politics every single time. And I think what's getting lost in all this narrative and this propaganda is the fact that this president is doing the same thing. He's putting people over politics. And Sue has a point, which I share, is that for him to be honest, straightforward, and bold. People are not used to that, because for the last 8 years, people was used to a very fine-speaking president. To his credit, President Barack Obama was a superb, tremendous speaker, great speaker. As far as governing goes, President Trump has him beat. So my only message to the president, to bring some a little bit more peace and stability, is keep doing what you're doing, Mr. President, because what you're doing right now, putting Michael out here in front of Cambodia daily, putting your team out there in front of the Cambodian Americans, that has never been done. It hasn't been done during the Obama administration, was not done during the Bush administration, during the Clinton administration. It was not done. The last time it was done was when President Reagan opened the doors to hundreds of thousands of Cambodian refugees after the killing fields. That was the last time any U.S. president engaged with the Cambodian community. That's right. Almost 3 decades, until a businessman from New York, a real estate mogul, who people said would never win the 2016 presidential election. Every single polling data had this president losing the 2016 presidential election by a landslide. Guess what? Providence. God answered for America and said, you're going to get President Trump, and now the Cambodian community is going to benefit. The Asian community as a whole is going to benefit off President Trump. And we are right now with the story that Mike's telling us. We're benefiting because law and order, 70% of the people in this country do not want to defund the police, and they are for law and order. And they are for it because of the same story that Sue told us, the same story that Mike resolved for this eight-month-old pregnant woman, was the fact that President Trump does not look at you based off your color, based off your race, based off your nationality. Regardless of what you hear from mainstream media, he does not look at you like that. He'll look at you the same way that Martin Luther King Jr. looked at you, for the content of your character, not the color of your skin. So to the president, I say, keep doing what you're doing, Mr. President, because no matter what the media says, you're going to have people like myself, people like Sue, people like Michael, who can see through all the fog, through all the mist, and look at all the accomplishments that you've done, all the promises that you fulfilled and kept since 2016.
Thank you. I'm almost running out of time for this special edition. I have one last question for Michael. It's about the trade war between the United States and China, the Sino-U.S. trade war. Many people think that the prolonged trade war between the two major economies might hurt, each other's citizens' pocketbooks. Do you think that the prolonged trade war between the United States and China could impact somehow the Cambodian economy in Cambodia?
Well, thank you for bringing up that question. A trade war on China is an opportunity for Cambodia to become rich like it's never become before. Because right now, all the Fortune 500 companies...
Instead of going broke, going poor, it's going rich.
Exactly, because while companies are pulling out of manufacturing, we already have established transparent working relationship in Cambodia. Most of our clothes, most of our manufacturing, a good small amount has already started. It's been well established, and it's going to continue to grow. Cambodia and America's relationship has been wonderful, and so as companies are going to be pulling out of China, they're going to be re-looking, re-evaluating, reassessing who are our friends and who's going to continue to work with us. And so it would be Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, even some Laos. There's some talks about Laos and trading with Laos. And so Southeast Asia is going to become so strong and so rich. And I think that as the Cambodians are in a really good position, because unlike China, where we're going to flood them with the debt, with the high-speed rail, and where Cambodia owes everything to China, and while they flood in their people and their way of life, we're here to realign our trading partners, and definitely Cambodia is in play. And so I think this is very good for Cambodia. When I went to travel to Cambodia just about a year ago, I couldn't find a single Cambodian where I needed a translator because everyone spoke English pretty well, and I was so impressed. And I think that amongst my friends and coworkers and investors, they're going to feel that not only it's a welcoming environment, and not only that everyone can speak English and is very, very educated, but also it's a beautiful place. And I think that with our friendly relationship, it's only going to grow. And I think that a trade war is just an opportunity zone for Cambodians, both in Cambodia and here in America, because a lot of folks would want to reach out to their families back at home and improve their relations here in America.
Thank you, Michael. That's all the time I have for this special edition, and I thank you all very much for taking the time to join our program. I should mention also that Michael Alfaro is a Marine Corps veteran doing a lot of humanitarian work in Laos, in China, and in Thailand. Ruan Viesna is also an Army veteran deployed to the Baltic states, Afghanistan, and Iraq as well. And we thank you, both of you, for your service to the country. And we hope that you come back on our program again at some point when you have something new to tell us. So for Sue Lack, also a great activist in Cambodian American community in the United States.